Can starting now. Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m. Welcome to our program today, Asian Real Estate Dollars. Returning to the US, are you prepared? It's our pleasure to have you join us for what will be a very interesting, informative, and compelling program. Before we start the presentation, I'd like to present our presenting sponsor for the program today for a few words of introduction. And let me just mention before I introduce him, we were introduced to Realm in recent years, and we were sort of captivated by the organizational structure, its operating ethos, the quality of its membership. And it's just rapidly growing both nationally and globally. So when we also dug deeply amongst our own membership base in the Bay Area, we found a number of the top producers amongst our member base were members of Realm. So with that, I'd like to introduce one of the co-founders, Brennan Buckley. Brennan, you've got some opening words for us, perhaps?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for the warm introduction, and it's a real thrill to be participating in this. You'll hear a little bit more from our founder, Julie Foppel, who's on the panel, but a word or two on Realm. So one of the challenges that we identified early in luxury real estate is that realtors tend to fit in a couple of silos. You're either in the silo of a brand, like a Compass or a Sotheby's or an independent brand like Vanguard or whomever, or you're in the silo of a marketplace, the Bay Area versus Los Angeles versus New York. So the whole idea for Realm is to build a brand agnostic community of luxury real estate agents. You can be from any brand, you can be from any market and be in Realm. However, and this is the big however, it is an invitation only group. So we've got 550 members really across North America and now starting to spill into Europe, a number from the Bay Area. But every single one has been individually invited in. Now, once you're in Realm, a couple of things happen. We build community. So we have events, really beautiful over-the-top luxury events. We also do a Zoom call every single Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Pacific. We never miss a Wednesday. We average about 140 professionals on these calls. We do panels, best practices, market updates, challenges in the market. And again, it's across all the brands. So we're learning from the best of the best from everywhere. The last piece of Realm I'll mention is our technology. And the best way to describe that, it's like the Match.com for luxury real estate agents. You will instantly learn more about your clients, and we then connect you, and you can do more research on your clients with data. And then we connect you with other Realm members from all different brands to kind of make referral opportunities happen, and they happen a lot. So that's a word or two on Realm. If you're interested in learning more, you can send me a private chat here, or you can visit realm-global.com. We'll ask a couple qualifying questions, and then I'll get back to you right away. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Brennan. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Of course.
A couple of quick housekeeping items, if we can. We've muted sound and video for everybody except the folks on the screen, the five of us on the screen. Occasionally, Zoom lets somebody in. If you see yourself on screen, please hit the video mute button. We did a program a year ago where somebody came on and they were in the bathtub. Go figure. So we want to make sure that nobody comes in under the wrong circumstances. There is a chat button at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to throw questions in there. I'll keep an eye on it from time to time, and we'll be able to incorporate that and take that into the discussion. And yes, this program is being recorded. Please, we'll upload the program to our YouTube channel this afternoon. We will send you the link via Eventbrite. So please look at your spam folders. I get 84 emails every afternoon after these programs are over because people won't check the spam folders. That's where the links are. But the program is being recorded. So with that, let's get down to business. Why today's program? Well, we've assembled a panel of frontline experts who can deliver unique insights about the international real estate buyers and investors. Who are they? Where are they coming from? How, where, what, and why are they buying, and what's precipitating what we think is a trend that's taking place. Now, anecdotal evidence, and we're getting this at LuxeSF, Anecdotal evidence within the Bay Area indicates that we're beginning to feel some sort of mild tremors in terms of some real estate investment from Asia and Pacific Rim. The buyer motivations may vary, but we're seeing some of that money, we think, coming back, and that money's been absent in recent years. We do, of course, have all of these rising geopolitical trends involving political and economic uncertainty within the Asian context. And I know that John will be talking about that today and specifically how that may affect the market. But we think this is a trend, and we put together the right four people to help us make sense of this. Very brief introductions. Julie, as we just know, is founder and CEO of Realm. And they represent an agent network that interfaces with the Asian buyer as well as their global network. Kristen Heathwood is Senior Managing Director, Market Development and Client Relations for Compass Development Marketing Group, which represents an impressive portfolio of real estate developments, including 181 Fremont, the residences at Yerba Buena and Stanley Ranch, the new Stanley Ranch at the Auberge, that's the Auberge Resorts Collection in Napa. Jeff Needham, our good friend, is U.S. Head of Mortgage Originations for HSBC Bank USA, and HSBC is one of the world's largest banking and financial services organizations, serving approximately 40 million customers globally, with much of its clientele comprised of Asian wealth market, the very market that we're talking about today. And John Yen Wong is founding chairman and chairman emeritus of ARIA, the Asian Real Estate Association of America, the undisputed leading organization in promoting sustainable ownership opportunities in rapidly developing Asian American communities in the U.S. To all of our panelists, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you today, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to start, if I may, with you, Jeff, and I want to pose the same question to all four panelists, just to sort of start at 30,000, then we'll come down. To what extent do you think, believe, know that Asian real estate buyers are in fact returning to the U.S. marketplace? And if so, let's assume that that's the case, is it a blip or is it a genuine trend? Jeff, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, of course, Alf. Thank you. And thanks for putting this together today and for having us all on here. Really appreciate it, because I think it's a critical topic and a timely topic. Certainly from our data that we monitor at HSBC, both within our wealth side and our lending side of the business, we're clearly seeing an uptick, right? And I'm not sure it should be a surprise to any of us, because if we go back to 2017, 2018, 2019, there was a significant amount of activity from Asian buyers and more broadly from international buyers. Clearly, we've had a pandemic effect as we've had across the broader economy, and that's certainly impacted I think the international buyer and certainly the buyer from Asia as well. We look at a lot of stats regarding certainly purchase transactions, visa issuance, L1 visas as far as kind of new to country folks moving to the U.S. to live and work, investment in the U.S. from a real estate perspective. All of those numbers are back up, and just a couple of tidbits. Visa issuance, I think, is back, resembling kind of 2018 levels, and for visas kind of across the board, whether that's an L1 intercompany transfer visa, someone coming to the U.S. to live and work now, whether that's a H1B1 visa issuance. Obviously, we've had a change from an administration. The last administration very clearly was limiting visas and trying to slow visa issuance. I think the current administration trying to pick that pace back up, and we're seeing that in the data as well. And even the B1, B2 visitor visa, Alf, we're seeing back the issuance of those visas back at levels dating back to roughly 2018. If you look at some of the NAR data, the National Association of Realtor data, if we resemble 2018, I wrote some notes. It was a $121 billion market for international buyers buying real estate in the U.S. Last year, pandemic impacted, was about a $59 or $60 billion market of international buyers. So if we're approaching visa issuance, movement of consumers globally back at a 2018 level, then we're, presumably, if we have some inventory, I'll let the real estate experts speak a bit about that, but presumably we're going to see a significant increase, I think, go forward, kind of post-pandemic relative to international buyers and certainly the Asian buyers coming back into the U.S. Have we lost you there, Alf?
Alf, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear us?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Your comment, and you're on mute.
Oh, perfect. I think that's for me, Alf. Thank you. No, I think, Jeff kind of brought up some great points, and I think it's more about normalization. When you look at the record numbers that we've been hearing about in terms of, housing and trades happening kind of post-pandemic, and now with the resurgence in terms of the, the Asian buyer and what that looks like, I think it's, you look over the last couple of years, and I think it was 2017 and 2018 when it really peaked in terms of buyers coming into the U.S. market internationally, and that was at from Asia 40,000 units per year roughly, and then that fell in half between 2019 and 2020, and then it fell in half again from 2021 to 2022. And so I think what we're seeing now is first we'll get to normalization as those numbers start to climb back up again. And then I think we will see, even increased demand just because of the fact that, international travel is open again, the borders are open. I think people's motivations look a lot different. And I think we've all kind of learned that it's a far more global world. And I think that trend, especially due to technology and people being able to work remotely from anywhere, I think that we'll see that really drive some lifestyle decisions in terms of where people are migrating to as well.
John, your comment?
Yeah, it's interesting on the real estate side, and I'll say from a personal standpoint, just these past 4 weeks, Betty and I've had clients from China who are looking at properties in San Francisco. Now, the nuance that all of them have children who are now working in the States, and all of them already have money that's outside of the country of China itself. They had businesses and had basic operations outside of mainland China, and therefore were able to both have financing for down payment, but also can qualify for mortgages because their children are working in finance and technology here. So that's that piece. The feeling, yes, and that hadn't happened for a little while during the pandemic. I think from a statistical standpoint, when we talk to other members of the Asian Real Estate Association from all the country, I think there is activity. Now it's nuanced. During that big Asian boom, and we're talking specifically about China right now, the crazy rich Asians, everybody has lots of money, they're going to offer more than that. That was a moment in time because everybody felt that every person of Asian, especially from China, could do that. And we're not seeing that anymore. And some of the stats kind of bear this out, the experience I just had described personally, that if you look at the stats of the average purchase price of foreign buyers, back in 2009 from China, it was about 342,000 in the purchase price. And it kind of kept up and down and up and down. During 19, it went down to 674,000, 622,000 in 220. But in 2022, it's at $1,570,000. That's average prices across the country. And what that means is the segment that can buy actually fits the audience of this particular a webinar. They're the folks who are wealthy, who have already managed to distribute funds around the world and can. So what we saw was you can call it an average working class individual from China. That market, I think, is not here right now. But it is the folks who can afford the luxury properties that are still very, very active. And differentiate that, that's China. If you look at the same stats for India, it has remained somewhat consistent. Back in 2000 2009, it was $401,000 average price. In 2022, 702. But that's just a bump up from 560 the year before and 660. So I think with the buyers from India, some of what we saw during the big boom, where there was a more broad segments of individuals from India buying the US, is still here. So I think that both of those, there's a differentiation. We have to be more nuanced in understanding where the money that is coming in and how to approach the buyers that are there.
Right.
Person, comment?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you compare and contrast, India versus China. I did read, I think this is interesting, not only in the purchase price, but also the percentage of cash buyers. So, it seems that those coming in from China are significantly purchasing property more with cash than in India. I think you're looking at almost 50% of the purchasers coming from China are buying all cash, whereas India is around 10%. So I think that's interesting in that demographic and the psychographic of the buyer. But one thing I did want to point out is, putting aside the data, I'm looking at what does my day-to-day look like? And my day-to-day with our team is that we are seeing more Asian investors and purchasers in the market than, let's say, a year ago, for sure. That has a lot to do with what Julie was mentioning and just the borders opening and international travel being more comfortable. But if I was to look at the who's calling us or the inquiries that are coming in today, it's those that are investors who are looking for bulk deals. And then there are those high net worth individuals that are looking for individual properties to add diversification to their portfolio, and or, as I think Julie was saying, there are those parents are buying because their kids either live here and work here, or they need to go to school here. But I do want to bring up one thing. I think it's interesting that we had 2 wineries sell up in Napa recently. One was Schaefer Vineyards, I think for $250 million, and the other was Seven Stones Winery for $38 million by South Korean entities. So, wine country is continuing its demand.
So, Crystal, I just want to go around the board quickly. Just one word answers here. So, is this a trend? Is Asian money a trend coming into the US?
Yes, but I think John's going to speak to some of the political climate that may change that.
But right now you feel it's not a blip.
No.
Same question, Jeff.
Yeah, I think it's a trend. And again, I think as all 4 of us mentioned, it's a bit of normalization, right? So we're getting back to
where we were.
Perhaps, slightly different edges around where we were, right? But I think you're seeing the movement of people globally again post-pandemic, and so the normalization is getting us back to a normalized, buyer environment from Asia and from the broader international space.
But it represents an opportunity for us.
Yeah, of course, because we didn't have those buyers the last couple of years, right? And so by all means, it represents an opportunity.
And Julie, very definitely.
100%. It's a reality, so I think it's something that's here to stay.
And John, definitely for you.
Absolutely, the trend, and I'll give you the reason for it is because for a lot of countries, major cities in Asia, the San Francisco Bay Area is still reasonably priced. Now, I know that we talked to San Francisco, the price point topping in the thousands per, but that's like the other cities. But if you look at Hong Kong, the average price per foot's about $26.55. In Japan, it's $15.16. And so perhaps in San Francisco itself, you have individuals that are the very, very upper end that can kind of even vote. But if you look at those average prices, for anyone living in the Bay Area, because you look at the entire Bay Area, I think our average price per foot's about $790 to $850. So in comparison, it's still positive. But also the things that we've always said, why the United States? You have the rule of law, you actually own the land underneath you, all of those that can play into it. So it's the trend has a basis for why people want to bring their money here.
Perfect. Let me just get a definition of Asian money, if I may. It's certainly China, India, Japan. I guess we can come down into Vietnam, but certainly the ASEAN countries of Cambodia, Indonesia, etc., Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam. In our conversation today, am I right in assuming that we are primarily talking China and India? Yes? No?
No. I
John?
think Vietnam, and you referenced that. I think it's sort of the player that's come. Their economy has grown by leaps and bounds. Even during the pandemic, the Vietnamese economy has grown. You know, after the fall of Vietnam a number of years ago, many of us thought it would never ever come back, just because it was war torn. You had cities that are blown up, but the innovation, if you look at the cities, you go to the cities of Vietnam now, they rival what Shanghai looks like. And in my conversations with ARIA members, and there's also an organization called VNAC, the Vietnamese, National Association we're very close to. It's kind of like China in those early days. All of a sudden, people made a lot of money. Now they wouldn't deal with it. And I think there are a lot of Vietnamese in it who see that. They also see that with the pandemic correction in prices, it was kind of like the Chinese coming to the US after the Great Recession and trying, and I think we're seeing that. I have not had a Vietnamese national client. I had a lot of Vietnamese refugee clients 30 years ago after the fall of Vietnam. But I sense that that's an area to look at. Jeff, I don't know if HSBC is thoughts or comments on that.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously have a presence literally in every country that I think Alf just mentioned, including Vietnam. And certainly I'd say Vietnam has to be on the radar. We're seeing some of the last stats we looked at from the EB-5 investor visa issuance, right? Which Congress re-upped the EB-5 last March. And for the first time, for the past 10 years, it had to be reviewed every year. Congress has finally extended that, so it's a 5-year issuance now from Congress. It has approved it, and so the EB-5 investor visa isn't going to run out next year and be approved again. We've got 5 years kind of runway with that,
Right.
and Vietnam right now is the largest issuance. Now, partially because China was locked down, but the largest issuance of EB-5 visas, Alf, are coming from Vietnamese. So those are wealthy Vietnamese, in essence, making the investment in the U.S. to get their visa to move themselves and their families here to the U.S. And so I think that's, again, the beginning of a trend. Clearly, Alf, I know you looked at our Frederick Newman, our economist.
Right, and I've got some stats from that too.
Yeah, so we published a report a few months back, The Rise of Asian Wealth, and so Vietnam's in there. Singapore, I think, is the other one, clearly seeing significant growth in high and ultra high earners and high net worth consumers in Singapore. So that's another market, and as John kind of pointed out, right? So Singapore, very high cost of housing. And when you find a Singaporean buying in the U.S., looking at what we would consider high cost markets, and it doesn't look so high to them, right?
Just to build
Jeff and John.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Alf. I'm curious to know Jeff and John's opinions on Korea, because we are seeing more and more purchasers come from Korea as well.
John, Korea?
Very high movement of money. It's interesting because if you talk to, and ARIA has significant membership of Korean heritage who do a lot of business, back and forth. I would say that South Korea has been a fantastic place to do business and live. And the experience of how sort of K-pop and during the downturn Korean dramas, the long-term series of them, have really given exposure. And what that has done is allowed, I think, the folks who say, younger folks, I want to make money, I want to develop fame, I'm going to stay right in South Korea. But now, as things have normalized, it's very similar. A lot of individuals have money to invest, and the thought of sort of expanding exposure and having some of that equity distributed in different parts and different things makes the United States again a natural. My feeling is that there are specific areas that are more directed for the Korean folks who are buying. I think Southern California is probably seeing a little more of it than Northern California, although we're actively looking at it. So Korea is real. So.
And Jeff?
Yeah, no, I hate to say it, but I concur with John. And I watched a lot of Korean dramas with John as well. So, but certainly Korea, I think I think Taiwan's another one, right? And some of that's to do with the infrastructure bill, and you've got the chip manufacturers in Korea now. A few of the large ones now building production facilities here in the U.S. Right, the onshoring of our chip manufacturing. That's one of these, again, downstream effects, I think, of the pandemic. Right, you're seeing an onshoring of a lot of manufacturing in the Americas, whether that's the U.S. or right on the border in Mexico. Right, but certainly the Taiwanese chip manufacturing. I mean, you have a couple of the larger ones. One is building a large production facility in Phoenix. They're moving about 500 of their Taiwanese engineers from Taiwan to the U.S. to open and operate that factory. Right, so they're going to be living and working in the U.S. They're buying real estate already, and then again, there's a lot of tentacles from that. It's not just that one firm, Alf. Obviously, it's all the suppliers to those firms that are going to have to move as well. So I think the downstream effect of onshoring. So products that we as U.S. consumers and consumers across the Americas need are going to be manufactured here in the Americas, and so you're going to see a lot of movement, not only from the wealthy investor. I think that's the new to country, employers, employees, right? Moving here to live and work, whether that's on an L1 company transfer visa. See a lot of engineers now getting hired, newly recent graduates getting hired on OPT and leveraging CPT visas now. So these are generally from wealthy families in Asia, staying in the U.S. to live and work. And again, that's driving some of that visa issuance. And so I think it's a broad-based kind of lift, Alf. It's not just to John's point, it's not the single wealthy Chinese. I think it's a broad Asian wealth play and investment to the U.S.
And John,
if I can make a real quick comment,
please.
On that. And so most of us who are on this particular webinar work in the Bay Area, but all of us have networks around the country. And as what Jeff has mentioned, that Taiwan Semiconductor opening up in Phoenix, the conversations with ARIA members in California and New York flowing to the Denver chapter folks is gigantic. Every single company that I see attending this one has brought internal networks where you can distribute referrals, across the board. And for those who choose, there's also realm. So I think the reality is the ability is not just say, are they going to come here, but they're coming into the United States, and we have the ability to send referrals with connections. That's I think how real estate works in this today. So,
Julie, I'm going to come to you in a moment, to you and Chris, and I want to get into some nitty-gritty specifics about these transactions. Before I do that, I want to build just quickly on what Jeff said about the research document that they produced. I took just 4 facts out of a heavy document. Fact number 1, Asia, with the exception of Japan, projected to surpass the US in financial wealth by 2025, with Vietnam and India to see especially brisk growth, while China's share in the region has already climbed to nearly 46%, and Japan's has fallen to a quarter. Number 2, the number of adults with wealth of at least $250,000 US plus has will more than double by the end of the decade in China, India, and the Asian countries that we talked about. Number three, excluding Japan and China, the number of Asia's millionaires will rise from about 10 million currently to 22 million by 2030. And then number four, region-wide, the number of millionaires is projected to jump from roughly 30 million currently to over 76 million by just the end of the decade. So it goes back to our opening comments. The opportunity here is huge. Julie, I wanted to start with some of the nitty-gritty aspects, if we can, of what we're seeing from the buyers themselves. Investment versus family-related use. Any trends there?
Oh, I think it's, I think you're seeing a combination of both, right? I think people are still, they're very mindful of, of overspending. They've got much more, I think a lot of times, in any of our markets, our sellers are looking for, as John said, the crazy rich Asian kind of persona, or the reckless Chinese billionaire that's going to come in and overpay for that property. And that doesn't exist. These are people that are very disciplined and measured, and really, there is a reason that they've kind of attained that level of status, in being high net worth or ultra high net worth. But I think more than ever, lifestyle is driving a lot of those decisions and kind of where they're investing, and whether it's they've got children that are in university somewhere in the States, and they want to, they want something for them, or they want something, for themselves when they're visiting. I think the other piece of all of this is, and I belong to the Young Presidents Organization, and I'm in a global chapter, and we were on a Zoom happy hour with some of my chapter mates in India, and one of them said, well, how do you define luxury post-pandemic? What does that look like? And he said, I define it as peace of mind. And I think that is really, the luxury of peace of mind is what is driving a lot of those decisions, whether it's, I want something where my family can kind of have a nexus and everybody can be together, or I want something that is going to sustain its value in volatile economic times. But it's all of those things that are kind of factoring into this new way of approaching real estate. And I think the other piece I just want to mention, Alf, is the generational shift happening, and kind of the shift in terms of values of, kind of baby boomers to Xers to millennials. I think the millennials are now informing the spend more than ever, even though it's, the money is not in their hands yet. They are the influencers. And I think that their focus is a lot on work-life balance, on, family and community. And we're definitely seeing a lot in terms of that demand.
But Julie, just the sort of the generic question, is there a major imbalance between somebody coming in because they want to move their funds and invest them in the US versus I'm coming because there's a lifestyle consideration that's driving the decision? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's both. I don't have a clear, yep.
That's what, Kristen, anything you can add to that? You're on mute. Kristen, you're on mute. Thank you.
Thank you. It is absolutely both. We're seeing both.
Okay. Again, staying, Kristen, with you and Julie, when the money's coming into the US, which markets is the money gravitating to? Is it the Bay Area? Is it Manhattan? We know obviously there's money coming in from South America through Miami and South Florida, but that Asian money, what is the port of entry?
Yeah, it is California, Florida. Actually, I think Florida is number one. Then it goes to California. You're looking at Texas, Arizona, and New York. Those are the big states that the money is coming in from the Asian market. And as far as here in California, this is no surprise. It's Los Angeles and San Francisco.
And Kristen?
I agree, Kristen, with you completely. I think it's all of those. I mean, we're seeing them. My home market is Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and we're seeing investors come to Jackson. We're seeing that more and more just because of that Western, the quintessential Western lifestyle. And, you know, so we're seeing it in the mountain states as well.
Just bear with me for a moment, folks. I've lost part of my screen here. Thank you. We're back. Price points. Kristen, stay with you if I may. When the money is coming in, what's the range?
Well, I think either John or Jeff touched on this earlier. I think the average, you know, nationally is up significantly as were home prices over the past couple of years. So it's roughly around 500,000 is the purchase price nationally. However, what I think is interesting is those individuals coming from China are in the $1 million plus. Right now, what we're seeing is the higher net worth individual coming in at a higher price point. It is less about the.
How high?
I'd say the sweet spots between 1.5 and 2.5.
That's what I'm looking for. Julie, you can add to that?
Yeah, I think it's the same. You know, we've seen them across the board. So it's, you know, it's interesting because if you've got somebody that is affluent, they're coming in and they don't have sticker shock because they're coming in from an expensive market to begin with. And so then it's more about kind of understanding the marketplace and understanding what they need to pay in order to get what they want. And it's usually very specific in terms of, you know, here's what I'm looking for. This is, and so that can be anywhere from, you know, in a market like Jackson Hole, that could be anywhere from $5 to $50 million.
Yeah, Alf, maybe I can add from the lending side. I can tell you what we're seeing, right? Yeah, so it's so completely agree with Kristen and with Julie. I think it comes down to the intent of that purchase, right? So if they're buying for themselves or family, clearly you're seeing, you know, higher end, more luxury property, right? Because their intent is to use it personally. I think if they're buying truly for investment purposes and they're looking for cash flow, right? Then I think you're seeing probably less luxury and just in broader markets. What we're seeing and the financing we're providing is broader markets where those international investors are able to cash flow so it's a little bit of a variance, I think, based on is it intended for personal use or family use, you know, a son or daughter going to university here in the U.S. and they're buying for that purpose, or they're buying for their own vacation or second home purpose, versus that investment property purchase. So that's where you're seeing some break, I think, relative to price point, based on your question.
Folks, I've got so many more questions to ask you, so I'm moving as quickly as I possibly can. Back to you, Chris and Julie, and John, I want to get you involved in this as well. Is it fair to assume, again, the Asian buyer, that the Bay Area is the #1 port of call for spending that money? Kristen?
I believe that it depends on the country of origin.
Stay with China.
I would say that China is San Francisco, but I would say that like Korea, and someone else had mentioned this, is likely Southern California. But both locations are of interest at this point.
By the way, is any of you seeing anything from Thailand? Is Thailand coming up in terms of a buyer channel? Quickly, Jeff?
Yeah, we're seeing some flow there. It's certainly the new to country, so people moving to live and work here from Thailand and from the Philippines as well. And we're seeing an uptick in again, some of the data we look at. Visa issuance to Filipinos clearly is increasing again. A lot of the visas on the Thai side and on the Filipino side are in many cases family visas versus a work visa, right? So they've got a parent or a sibling here already, and they're finally getting access to bring another family member over. So it's driving some of that, but in a lot more of those cases, John, I think we're seeing those buyers purchasing for their primary residence, right? They're going to be moving, physically relocating to the U.S. and we're seeing a lot of that again with the onshoring of a lot of these companies, as we spoke about. Obviously, HSBC, we were founded as a trade bank, so we bank on the commercial side, on the investment banking side, a lot of these global firms that are moving their employees, cross border. and that's a lot of activity that we're seeing as of late. That our production is up while the broader real estate industry and mortgage market is down, significantly, obviously from 2 years ago and even from last year. We're seeing an increase in new to country lending. So lending to those buyers without any U.S. credit that are moving to the U.S. We have obviously a very niche offering for those particular buyers. While we can lend to foreign nationals buying investment or second home, those primary residence buyers without U.S. credit is a clear niche for us. And because we bank their corporates, we've got special offers for those employees of those firms as well.
Same question to you, John. We're running out of time here. Is it fair to say, is the assumption correct that the Bay Area is the primary port of call for that Asian money?
I'm going to respond to that, and it may not be popular on this. I think New York is still the #1 target. I think New York is just kind of globally known. And so that's always an area that folks are going to look at. San Francisco, the Bay Area is a strong second. I will say that it has faded a little bit, and for a variety of reasons, but a lot of it is because the tech industry drew a lot of investors from Asia and China in particular here. Right now with the pandemic, we have sort of a dispersion of the tech industry across the country. And one of the fastest growing, I think in fact, last year, the state with the largest influx of folks with Asian AA and HPI background was actually Idaho. And the reason is how did Idaho have this largest growth? Well, if you're a tech worker in Seattle, you're a tech worker in Portland, that's an hour flight for the once a month meetings that you have, and you can get a whole lot more land. It's kind of like Bay Area folks moving to Austin, moving to Phoenix. So I think that the attention is still be New York and San Francisco, but I mentioned the referral. We have connections in some of these other areas, especially as Jeff mentioned, when you have large semiconductor companies opening, those become actually good investment areas. And so I think that it's got to be broadly open. One other quick comment of port of entry. Our experience is actually Mexico has been a place where a lot of money from the mainland is going to, that after a while ends up looking at property in San Francisco. I think ARIA's for-profit city, ARIA Global, is hosting an event called Passport Mexico City. And it's 300 folks, and there are actually quite a few folks from Asian countries, in Korea, I think even a few folks from China, because the restrictions of them going to Mexico is not as stringent as coming to the United States. So I think and China itself making a lot of infrastructure investments in Latin America regardless. So I think that that's an area to pay attention to as far as where buyers may be coming from.
Kristen, to you, Julie, and Jeff, I want you in on this as well. And again, folks, brevity, if you will, because I've got so much more to cover. Financing, all cash purchases, any financing? What's the mix, Kristen?
I think I mentioned this before, but my understanding, and this, I'm pilfering this data from the National Association of Realtors, but it appears that you've got a significant amount of purchases that are all cash, but it does depend on the country of origin. So as I mentioned, India is at about 10% cash, whereas China is much more significant at over 45%. So it does depend on the country of origin.
Julie, anything to add?
Yeah, I think especially when you're looking at people buying kind of in the luxury range, I think it's largely cash. It's cash driven. And if they're doing anything, it's usually on the back end of the transaction when they'll go and, finance it kind of after the fact.
Jeff, when they want to move the money, is there an easement? Is there an easing now of money flow, or are the banking regulations very, very hard to get money into the US?
Yeah, again, it depends by country. So I'd say a couple of things. Certainly, China, there's been no easing of the Safe Act restrictions they have as far as conversion out of renminbi and movement of funds, and so China is still very much a challenge for people to get funds out, right? And given the China laws there. movement more broadly beyond China, and India's got a few restrictions, and Vietnam's got a few restrictions, but more broadly, I'd say the advent of digital banking is allowing funds to move so much faster, so much easier. We now have on my phone right here, Alf, I've got access to 30 currencies through our global money account at HSBC that I can convert to right now. I can move funds internationally. I can pay a vendor internationally, and it's almost immediate payment. So the technology and the digital advances, I think, with money movement, it clearly is making making life easier for kind of the global consumer and their ability to move funds. What we found is, in addition to that ease of moving money, is we've worked hard just over the last year. You were talking about cash buyers. That's our biggest competitor in the space, quite frankly. And we've got a bunch of real estate practitioners here on the Zoom, right? So love cash buyers. As a lender, we love someone who can pay cash but wants financing, right? Because they're a really good credit risk. That's our biggest competition in this space. It's not other lenders, because this is really a niche for us, but it's the cash buyer. But we're doing things. We've got a technical refi program that we launched a few years ago to allow customers, to Julie's point, to get cash after the fact if they want to pay. We've created a BYOC. We got people bringing their own credit from their home country, so we've expedited the process. We have an ease and speed process for our international buyers. We can compete. An international buyer can compete with a domestic buyer. We'll close loans in 20 days for an international buyer, even if they have no U.S. credit, even if their funds are overseas. So we've been trying to adapt to compete with these cash buyers, to give them cash. We're about 60 days away from launching a foreign national home equity product. So all these cash buyers who want to get cash out of that property they bought last year or 10 years ago, we're going to have a product that allows them to tap that equity and perhaps buy another property or invest differently in the U.S. as well, because of all the cash buyers.
Quickly now, some marketing stuff, if we may. Kristen and Julie, to you primarily, and John, I want to get you in as well. When we're promoting our properties to the Asian buyer, what are the major directives? What are the major considerations? What are the mandates? Julie, start with you.
I think one of the things to really remember is that, they're working off of their own social networks over there. So it's a different WeChat versus Facebook or Instagram, and developing a marketing campaign that's going to that's actually going to reach them. And I think also influencer marketing is critical. It's kind of the idea of the luxury of trust and the fact that it's not so much they're a lot less trusting of the large institutional kind of advertising, far more trusting of the kind of peer-to-peer approach in terms of marketing and messaging, and really using influencer marketing to get your message across.
An example of influencer marketing, Julie?
Oh, whether it's somebody, of course, the first thing that pops into my mind is the ridiculous Kardashians, but like that, like that. But it's like the
equivalent.
Exactly, the equivalent, and it's somebody that is kind of a peer to them.
Kristen, anything to add?
I want to emphasize one word. When I was prepping for this, the word is trust. You have to build trust. So I concur with Julie.
John, anything to wrap that up?
Yeah, I would say that, the websites like Fang and Anjuki, a lot of Chinese consumers use, but the reality is a whole lot of them look on Zillow, believe it or not. And there are now language capabilities. I think what's more important than that from a personal standpoint is the personal network. It's within ARIA, the folks we know, within the NAR, global CITS network, who are members of Realm. That's where I think the real juice is. And you can have a broader network, but I think as I mentioned, is that if somebody they know mentions something, then actually there's attention.
John, I want to stay with you. The cultural nuances in dealing with an Asian buyer. What is the primary mistake that we should not make?
To assume that they will overpay because they don't know any better the sophistication of the consumers from Asia, and including China, is very high right now. They know a market, just like we say that the consumers of the United States, sometimes through their own research, they know as much about a property in a neighborhood as the real estate agent. The same can be true for the Asian consumer. And so what we can do is to give some nuances, but the days of saying a consumer from Asia won't know anything and then we can just, we're everything to them. You have to really, like in US relationships with clients, develop more of a partnership relationship, a little more back and forth.
To Chris, and to you and Jeff, when you're dealing with Asian clients and Asian customers, do you find that they would prefer to talk to an Asian American representative on the other side of the table, or don't they care? Kristen?
And I think that's evolving. From my perspective, that's evolving. I would say, 10 years ago, that was absolutely the case. I would say that is evolving, and you've got the younger generation who doesn't want to be treated differently. They want to work with whoever it is that they can trust, and it isn't necessarily someone from their similar country of origin.
And Jeff, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it has. I think that cultural connectiveness has dissipated a bit, right? And I think it's back to the, as the three experts just said, right, the trust and the partnership, right? And so if you can build trust and develop a true partnership with those buyers, I think that gets over, a specific, request for language need or the cultural background. Now, I do think there's still familiarity, right? And I think that that helps. And like our team, we speak 28 languages across the U.S. on our mortgage lending team, and so I think when you've got somebody who has that kind of cultural connection, I think that might advance the trust and the partnership a little bit faster. But I don't think it's a mountain that can't be climbed.
Good. Okay. Back to Chris and to you and Julie. Design characteristics. Let's assume that somebody is coming in from China and they're buying a $3 million property in the Bay Area. Are there any basic design characteristics that are mandated? Is feng shui a mandate? Are you seeing any patterns in terms of what they're buying in terms of that property? Julie?
I think, what they're looking for is instant gratification. So something that is totally complete, that they can move in and it's turnkey, ready to go. I think the other piece is that, having space for a large family, and kind of multiple living areas for people so that they can kind of spread out and have room. I think large masters is something that that we've heard a lot, that's in demand, and I think that's what we're hearing.
Kristen, anything to add?
Generally, we're seeing they prefer new homes, whether it's new condominiums or new single family.
John, anything to add quickly?
Yeah, I'm going to finish with a personal story. So I received a referral from a person I know from the National Association of Realtors, and he is in Montana. The referral was for a buyer from Korea who owns a tech company, and he was in the Bay Area looking for a home. I don't speak Korean. So the reason I got the referral is because the NAR relationship, but it's because one of the friends of this agent referred to me, sister lives in Australia, and this Korean tech guy was flying her into the Bay Area to be his translator. So we looked at property in Hillsborough. Price point was in the 5 to 8 million. We had his translator from Australia, who was the sister from somebody in Montana, whom I know real estate. So that's how real estate works these days. And as far as the language capability, that was an extreme example. But so many buyers from Asia now have children who are here, who are fluent in the language and the culture. It's very much a domestic Asian segment. There was a time you have to speak Chinese to work with a Chinese domestic client. No, their kids help them translate. Sometimes it's the story of the 8-year-old. Now they're the college students at Stanford or, who are very capable of helping be there. So you don't have to be from the country of origin to access this business.
Hey, John, remind me, who was helping with financing for that Korean buyer?
Yes.
They paid all cash.
No, they were looking for financing, so that was good news. Sorry,
to the panel overall, any impact from crypto? Julie?
Yeah.
No, Kristen?
No, I would say most high net worth individuals right now are looking for hard assets.
Gotcha.
Amen.
John, I'm going to ask you to end, if you will. We've got 3 minutes here because we try to get off the line. I know we'll start to lose people right at the dot. Just the political situation right now between the US and China. You can't turn on cable news without seeing blaring headlines. We've got the Russian thing in there as well. Sort of from a macro point of view, is that really going to affect our business? I want to be very centered on real estate transactions between Asia and the Bay Area. Do you see that getting in the way, or is it going to help?
Yes, and I think that's where we as an industry and practitioners from all backgrounds can support. I think that the reality is, from a real estate standpoint, it works because there's sort of a global flow. It's domestically go from state to state and from country to country. I think what's happened is that it's so politicized that all of a sudden there are countries where we have to be careful of. There are concerns with mainland China, there are concerns with North Korea, the concerns of Iran. All that is real. But I think that how we're responding is a sledgehammer. Much like in the past, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there were American citizens of Japanese descent were put in internment camps. There were exclusionary laws that prevented folks of Chinese heritage to buy property. And that's reemerging. It started, the headlines now are in Texas with Senate Bill 147. I think the real difference is that this not only prohibits individuals from those countries where we may have situations with, but it includes folks who are not yet American citizens. So that if you're a green card holder or a permanent resident, have lived in Texas for a long time, you're prohibited by any real estate. There's no longer just agricultural real estate providing a house. There is a proposal from a congressman in one Midwest who's proposing that to be federal, and they're redefining what is a foreign national to include those who have permanent residency cards. If we do that, the number of buyers significantly decreases, and it's not just to say self-serving, no, we in the industry want to do more transactions. The reality that changes the shift of what America has always been as being welcoming for those who be joining us. So I think that
John, what does that mean for the realtors who are on the call for us today operating in the Bay Area?
Was to be conscious of stuff that's happening in other states and in Washington, D.C. that may shift down into California and the San Francisco Bay Area. California's already happened. A couple of years ago, the California legislature passed a regulation against individuals associated with the Chinese government from buying agricultural land. And I think it was mentioned earlier that the Chinese only 1% of agricultural land in the entire country. But it was in the midst of the pandemic, all of our shelves at supermarkets were empty. And there was anxiety about another country weaponizing food. The challenge is that fear creates these strong reactions. There should be some sort of concern and reaction, but it should be more targeted rather than broad-based. And now we're seeing that it's going from agricultural land to purchase of any real estate whatsoever. That's going to impact the commercial space. It's definitely going to impact the residential space. So we should be conscious of it and be comfortable in speaking our mind to say that this is not what America is all about.
But to you, Jeff, and to you, John, one-word answers, please. The current political strife and discord between America, the US, and China, do we see that having any form of blockage on the flow of those real estate dollars coming into our marketplace. Jeff?
I think you've got two things. You've got what's happening with the Chinese government and what's happening with Chinese consumers, and I think those two things are separate. I think Chinese consumers have significant interest in continuing to buy real estate in the U.S.
That's what it was. Okay. And John?
I would say yes, if this continues, it will have some impact. So I
Excellent.
think that we need to be conscious of it.
Panel, I want to thank you very, very much. I've seen comments come through on our chat button about this being a very informative. We crammed a lot into 1 hour. I really appreciate your honesty, your candor, and the actual useful information that we can take away today. I want to remind our audience that this program was recorded. Please check your spam folders this afternoon. You'll see the link from Eventbrite for the recording if you want to go back and get it. And I want to give a quick heads up for our next program on the 13th of April. We'll be doing a program called Lust for the Deal. Anytime I hear the word lust, I get excited. We're talking here about the incredible opportunities right now to sort of get into the condo buying arena in San Francisco, particularly in the Soma area. So that program is going to be a doozy coming up on the 13th of April. With that, panel, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a little after 11 o'clock. We are adjourned. Adios. And
Thank you,
have a
Al.
good day to everybody.
Pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Alf.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.